Okay, we are on the Ultimate Sports Network. We are here with Mr. Gibson, and we're going to talk about Florida international football and the upcoming season and what should, what could, what might happen, and all that good fun stuff. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Frank. It's good to be here, just talking about FIU football, giving it the attention that I think it deserves.
Okay, normally I don't give an introduction, and I just did because I wasn't thinking. So introduce yourself in a manner in which the people will respect.
So I'm Richard Gibson. I am the director of sports for Panther Now, which is FIU's own student media. We have both a physical newspaper as well as an online website where we cover everything. And I've been a part of it for about a year and a half now, almost 2 years to this point. And, football season is right around the corner for FIU, and there's quite a bit to talk about coming off of last year. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's jump right into it. And as I mentioned off there, the way we're going to go, and I'm going to completely flip it up. This is the 5th year of Butch Davis. Mm-hmm. So he should have most of his recruits in. He should have things the way he wants it to go. And we know Butch's history from college, from the pros and all that. How important is it now that he has his program hopefully where he wants it?
I don't think it's ever been more important to him, unfortunately, because I believe that he is very much on the hot seat. If he can't put together a decent team this season, then I can't see a reason for him to stay, because FIU is coming off probably the worst season in its history. It was plagued by injuries. It was plagued by COVID, and it was plagued by 5 losses out of a potential 12-game season. The rest were canceled, mainly because of FIU, and either because of COVID concerns or because of injuries on the team. And in some cases, it was both of them, to the point where FIU just did not have enough players to play the game. Last year was a train wreck, and I think it was highlighted by the fact that we lost to an FCS team in Jacksonville State. That was sort of the cherry on top in what I thought was an abysmal season. And I really do feel like the bar can't be set any lower than what it is right now. So for Butch Davis's sake, I think that some of the offensive woes that the team faced last year, along with some of the other mistakes that the defense made, the special teams made, and bringing in a recruiting class that I do think is solid, but I don't think is up to par with what he should be able to bring to a program like FIU, dead in the center of Miami, the heart of Miami. We have young talent all around us, and yet I feel like there are still plenty of questions to be had about some of the most important spots on the roster, especially the quarterback position. So I think, so I think that Butch Davis has a lot on his plate this season, but if it doesn't turn out, let's just say this: if FIU doesn't get into the game this season, I think that might be it for Butch Davis at FIU.
Okay. Now, understanding 2 things that are very important from where you are located. One, for people that don't understand how much football is played in the state of Florida, who've only driven into Florida and went, geez, it took me 6 hours to get from northern Florida to southern Florida. How important is it to differentiate FIU from FAU and all the other schools that are in Florida?
So, funny thing, FIU and and students and fans of FIU sort of emphasize this college as the premier college in Miami when it comes to culture, when it comes to variety, and when it comes to location. Obviously, when people think of college, not even just college football, when they think of colleges in Miami, there's really only one that comes to mind, and it's the University of Miami.
But which isn't in Miami.
It's in Coral Gables, So there are a lot of great colleges in the South Florida area. Like you mentioned, you have Florida Atlantic and Boca Raton, and you have a couple of smaller colleges here and there. But FIU we credit ourselves, and it's not like we hide it. We credit ourselves into going out and saying that we are the real Miami University to the point where we we call the University of Coral Gables, UCG.
Right.
And we aren't afraid to admit that whenever they play us in football or soccer or basketball, you name it. So and that's why I think that the recruiting class for FIU football is not where it should be, considering the location of, like I mentioned earlier, the location of FIU and the fact that we have a professional football coach who did work for the NFL for quite some time, and yet we lose out to the University of Miami. We lose out to FAU, and we lose out to the rest of the country in fresh recruits from the South Florida region.
And that's important, knowing that he has a history in the city. And you would think, even if he's not going to get the upper tier guys, he should still get guys that are leaving to go someplace else in Tennessee or Ohio or wherever else. You think you would be able to get the South Florida players. Now, looking as well, you have something important to also think about. You are in Conference USA, which, for those that don't understand, it's a far-reaching conference, but they're in major areas in the country. So if you can't, or if he can't pull this off, it's kind of tough, because you're looking at the Houstons and the Rices and these places that are, in major hotbeds as well. How are you going to fare in Conference USA this year?
Yeah, and throughout the course of FIU's pretty young history, being a football program since 2000, I believe, 3, there have been some players from the local area that we've snagged that have turned out well, such as I would say the best case example of this was T.Y. Hilton and the great years he had for FIU, and then he went to the pros. He's with Indianapolis now, and he's doing great. But there are other examples of this where other teams in Conference USA got the dibs to local South Florida players that you just scratch your head and say, well, how could we have not gotten them? And I think a big example of that from a few years ago was Devin Singletary, running back for Florida Atlantic, and now he's playing professional ball with Buffalo, and he's doing really good. So I do think it's disappointing. However, I will say that even with the struggles that FIU has had in recruiting, winning can fix that. If we put together a great season, make it to a bowl game, and then the word gets around that FIU really does have a respectable football program, then I don't think that's going to be a problem. But like I mentioned earlier, we're coming off an 0-5 season that was abysmal, and obviously that was not a good look for FIU. Now they were one of very few FBS teams that actually lost to an FCS team. And like I mentioned earlier, the bar is so incredibly low for this season that without a few cases here and there, I can't really see FIU being as disappointing on the field as they were last year.
Well, and you mentioned that, and we mentioned the conference, and we have to look at, and I know the pandemic has a lot to do with it, but looking back at last year, in a comparable setting, I think conference-wise, the Sun Belt had a great year as opposed to Conference USA. So you have three things that you have to play with. One, you have to play with South Florida and the city of Miami.
Yeah.
Two, you have to contend with the rest of Conference USA. And three, as a conference, you're competing with the Sun Belt, who I'm going to say, in my opinion, was pretty much an afterthought a couple of years ago as opposed to Conference USA. And now the Sun Belt, the Fun Belt as people are calling it, they're looking like they're on the rise. They've got a couple of ranked teams this year going in preseason. So what looks to be the thing, let's start with the offense, that you can hang your hat on offensively this year, or person or grouping or however you look at it?
Yeah, so the biggest issue that I see with the offense for FIU is their quarterback position, because there's a ton of uncertainty in the area. Last season and the past few seasons, as a matter of fact, the offense has ran this scheme of substituting the quarterback every other play or so, or every other drive or so, to see what works for them. So they'll start one quarterback in the game, and it can be as quick as, if it's 3rd and long, they'll swap to a different quarterback and see how they do. And I just don't think that's a recipe for success. I would say it's similar to what the Saints did with Taysom Hill and Drew Brees a few years back, but FIU has not had near the amount of success that New Orleans had doing that. And I feel like the quarterbacks for FIU are decent. Like, we have talent in the position, but if they don't get enough snaps and enough reps, and they don't get enough experience to learn through their mistakes by being there on the field, such as failing to convert a third down, throwing an interception, being sacked, I don't see how they can progress. And there is a bit of good news for that, because we actually fired our offensive coordinator this offseason and have gotten a brand new one that hopefully can understand that swapping quarterbacks in between drives is not the recipe for success.
Well, I think what happens, and what I've seen there, is you're swapping similar style quarterbacks. You're just trying to find what works. What New Orleans would do, the Saints would do, is Drew Brees and Taysom Hill were completely different. And I'm going to show my age here. You go back to the early 80s, where the Eagles would do the same thing with Ron Jaworski and Randall Cunningham. It's 3rd and 27, bring in Randall Cunningham. We're going to do something different with this guy than we're going to do with that guy. But if you're just searching for solid footing from one guy or the other, then neither one are going to find that common ground. So like you said, you have to figure out. So as it stands right now, if you had to put your last $3 on, is it Bortenschlager or is it Wiggins?
I'm going to say Wiggins. I think Wiggins is the bigger playmaker between him and Bortenschlager. I think Bortenschlager is, a little better at staying in the pocket and looking for the open receiver. But I feel like Kalen Wiggins is better at avoiding the sack and making big plays through scrambling. He actually kind of reminds me of a very young Lamar Jackson. But at the same time, Wiggins had the fewest snaps of any quarterback last year, because he was substituted for Bortenschlager or Stone Norton, who's not on the program anymore.
Right.
So I would say day one, and it's still a competition to see who will be the starting quarterback. But between him, Bortenschlager, and a couple of other newer players that we've gotten, I think it should be Kalen Wiggins. And he should actually be given time to progress through a game and actually learn, instead of having to be subbed out by someone else. Well,
and the rest of the guys in the depth charts are either transfers or freshmen. So unless they've been able to get acclimated right away, you would think you'd start with those two and hopefully find one. You also have new guys coming on the offensive line. As we know, you can't do much without an offensive line. What's the stability like there?
Funny enough, I feel like the offensive line last season was average, but not in a sort of bad way. They did their job most of the time, and the few times where Norton or Bortenschlager or Wiggins had to move around was because the receivers couldn't get open, or tight ends and whatnot. I feel like the offensive line, like I mentioned, was never the biggest concern for FIU's offense, and this goes to their receiving core and running backs as well. I think FIU has the best running back in Conference USA in Devontae Price. I think he is an absolute playmaker. And if I had to guess that if any FIU player were to eventually be drafted to the NFL, it would be Devontae Price. I think he actually is a very solid player that has NFL potential. FIU has some weapons on offense. They just need to find the right quarterback to lead them. I feel like that's the biggest takeaway from FIU.
So you look at your offense just as it's constructed now. You would prefer to be, and I know this isn't the way football is played now, but it might be a better way for Butch to say we're going to be a run first team as opposed to trying to figure out what we're doing with these quarterbacks. Because your offensive line is decent, and your receivers are getting there, and your quarterback's getting there, but you do have a good running back.
And that's obviously a really great thing for an offense to fall on, is if the receivers or the tight ends aren't cutting it, you have a running back that can still create gaps, can get those 5 to 10 yard plays, can get you those first downs and eventually score for you. So I think Devontae Price is the staple of FIU's offense. Even last year when our offense really struggled, Devontae Price still made some incredible plays to at least keep FIU close in a lot of these games, such as against Liberty and even against Jacksonville State. He was there to not make it seem like FIU was getting blown out of those games. But yeah, I would say that the sole shining light, the sole beacon of light for FIU's offense is Devontae Price, and thank goodness he's allowed to stay another year because of the NCAA allowing seniors to stay one more year. So thank goodness. Otherwise, I really couldn't tell you who the best player on the offense is. Yeah. Otherwise,
now when we flip it to the defense, at least you have experience coming back. But is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
I think that the fact that most of the defense is coming back is a good thing, because now they have the opportunity to redeem themselves, the opportunity to showcase their talent in a full 12-game season instead of having to worry about COVID, having to worry about injuries, and having to worry about the uncertainty of football in the year of 2020. Again, I think our defense is solid. There were moments not just last year, but a couple of years ago in which they've absolutely blown teams out of the water. They have shown that they are capable of going up against not just Conference USA teams, but even teams outside of the conference, such as that miraculous win against Miami a couple of years ago. So I think our defense is in an all right spot. It could be better, and that goes back to recruiting, because just like there's offensive talent to be seen in Miami high schools all across here, there's also defensive talent.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously colleges such as the University of Miami have a really great experience recruiting defensive players to their cause, and I don't think FIU has really reached that level yet.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned about recruiting, which really focuses in here, if you're recruiting South Florida, you're recruiting the same guys that Miami is recruiting, or at least the same kind of guys. So that intimidation factor of, or if you want to call it that, of guys that are 5 stars opposed to 4 stars, they've played against each other, so they know. And they may have been 5 stars 3 years ago, but now maybe I'm a 5-star, depending upon coaching and conditioning and maturity. So especially on the defensive end, because, some guys, like a DN, he's not ready to play right out of high school. Right out of high school, he may be 6'2", 210, and by the time he gets to his third year of college, he may be 6'3.5", 265. So he's got that experience now, the maturity level. So are there any of those guys? We're looking at a lot of seniors and a lot of, again, we got guys that get an extra year. Are there any of those guys that they're looking at having a breakout season this year just because they've had a chance to be around the program for a while on the defensive side?
I will say that if there's any part of our defense that I think will have that breakout year, it'll probably be our defensive backs. Both Richard Dames and Rashard Dames are brothers, but I think they're really talented players that provide a little bit of experience to the backfield for the defense. I think our defensive line is good. Devon Strickland is a really good member of that core. And a few other veterans that, like you said, are returning from last year, along with some newcomers that hopefully can add some fresh talent to the defense. You mentioned the fact that we have to go up against Miami in recruiting more than any other college in South Florida, and it's only becoming more difficult now that NCAA players can receive endorsements, they can receive money, and I'm just going to be honest. If you're a high school student looking to go to a college in South Florida, the first thing you're going to look at is probably the fact that for Miami, Derek King just signed a huge deal to rep the Florida Panthers. And for FIU, we don't really have, aside from Devontae Price, who signed a deal with Barstool, we don't really have a player who has shined as much as Derek King has for UM. And it's about popularity, and it's about what I'm going to be honest. Like when I was in high school, I didn't know until my junior year that FIU really was a thing.
Right.
Right. I was a fan of the Hurricanes growing up. I watched the football games, and obviously now I'm at FIU. I'm of course a Panthers fan, and I cover the Panthers extensively, but it's that pride that the University of Miami has with recruiting that can draw players in. in addition to the fact that now they can make money and again, they can play in the ACC and have a better chance of having their talent shown nationally so that you can be drafted versus the Conference USA, where not every player that really has a great career at a university is probably going to go to the NFL. So it's difficult. It's difficult to recruit when you have our big brother only about half an hour away or so.
Right.
But again, like I mentioned earlier, winning can solve that. If FIU has an incredible season, makes it to a bowl game and wins the bowl game, that can obviously bring a lot of recognition to FIU. And of course, and again, the University of Miami is ranked. So, that sort of throws a wrench in our plan of trying to get the upper hand on them. So we'll see what happens this season. There's a lot that rides on this season, not just for how FIU fares as far as their actual record.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because I'm from Ohio. I'm from North Central Ohio, and everyone knows of the Ohio State University. But what people don't know that there are, and I'm going to get the number mixed up, I believe there are 7 other FBS schools in the MAC in Ohio. Now, I grew up with people that ended up going to Bowling Green, ended up going to Akron, ended up going to these other schools, and they're still Ohio State fans. You know, come Saturday, they don't wear the Bowling Green colors. They go to an Ohio State game because Ohio State is the thing. Of course, you ask the question, why did you go to Bowling Green if you're an Ohio State fan? But that's where they wanted to go to school because of a program or something like that. But everyone thinks of Ohio State when they think of Ohio. So that's an easy recruiting tool, even if you're going to a small school, even if you're not, the goal is to get recruited by Ohio State. And we have those stories of one brother goes to Ohio State and the other went to OU and they played each other and that kind of thing. But it's kind of the same thing. You got the big brother syndrome there. And it's like you said, with the NIL now, how do you overcome that? And again, I go back to Butch Davis and say that was the cachet of bringing in Butch Davis. If that doesn't pan out, not that we're calling for a set or anything like that, don't anyone misconstrue that. But if you say he's on the hot seat and that doesn't play out, what can you do? Because now your coaching staff and your coaches, they have to be more than just coaches. They have to be able to be magnets, especially where you are. Where do you go? Do you go try and talk Randy Shannon into coming, or I mean, that's just the first name that came to my head, but what do you do? Just building a program on the field isn't enough anymore.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned our big brother being over there and the fact that most people can recognize the University of Miami over FIU. And it's crazy to think because just look at the size difference of both colleges. The University of Miami has around 10,000 students or so on campus, and FIU has around 55,000. We have multiple campuses across the South Florida area. The size difference obviously plays towards FIU, but as far as athletics go, what does FIU have to prove? I mean, what can we say that we have an advantage over? I think the best athletics team that FIU has is the swimming and diving program. They've won 7 straight Conference USA championships, which is pretty remarkable. I'll give them credit, but no one here goes to a swimming match. And even for football, the Ricardo Silva Stadium is only around half full if we're playing a recognizable team in Conference USA, such as Marshall or UAB or whatnot. But if we're playing a team like Rice or a team like UMass or whatnot, it's kind of embarrassing to see the seats behind the goalpost and they're entirely empty.
Yeah. So what's the model? What do you try and do? Because you're talking about the same thing that I believe Central Florida had the same issues with a few years ago. And I don't know if you want to say that Scott Frost or whatever was the catalyst to that, but a lesser known school, no offense intended, that's a big school. You know, one of the biggest schools in the country, Central Florida, as far as enrollment is concerned. But if you don't live in Florida or you're not a stat geek like myself, you don't know that. So how is that what you look at that model of saying, other than, of course, having Mickey Mouse right down the street? Do you look at that and say, hey, we have to look at this way. We have an enrollment the size of any school in the ACC, for example. And we need to capitalize on that. Do you upgrade facilities? Do you bring in a big name coach? What has to be done?
We need to win, bar none.
Well, that
We
helps,
have to
yeah, right.
win. The University of Central Florida found success,
Right.
and their program grew as a result. Now, even if you don't really know anything about Central Florida, you can remember that they had that perfect season and that they won the Peach Bowl. FIU has to succeed. We have top-notch facilities. We have a really solid stadium. The university pours so much money into the football team for brand new uniforms, state-of-the-art locker rooms, and just giving it as much coverage as they can. And yet fan interest on Saturdays is rough because most of the students on the weekends leave the campus and go do something in South Florida. But winning can fix that. It's kind of the same thing for most sports teams in South Florida, where not all fans are from here. If the Dolphins win, Hard Rock Stadium is going to be full. If the Heat win, then the FTX Arena is going to be full. If the Florida Panthers, who have been regarded as a pretty below average organization, if they win and if they go to the playoffs, their stadium will fill up as a result. And that's something that I feel like FIU should take precedence over pouring all this money into these fancy uniforms and these fancy locker rooms. They should focus on winning, because winning will fix this. And it's something that this program has hardly ever had. So, and especially in matchups such as Florida Atlantic, where we finally get some more national spotlight because the games are usually televised nationally between FIU and FAU. We haven't beaten FAU since 2016.
Right.
So they'll get the recognition for that, and we get nothing. So
is that recruiting? Is that coaching, or is it lightning in a bottle and something happens? Development of the players already there. What has to be done? And I know you're looking at them waving a magic wand. I get that, but in your opinion, what is it that's missing? Because if we have facilities, we have everything else. What is it that's missing that will allow us to swing for the fences?
That I know that's something that FIU themselves has been trying to figure out for a long time. Like they have fan rallies on Saturdays, and every now and then they'll even do a giveaway at the games. There'll even be to the point where I've heard that some professors can offer a little bit of extra credit if the students go to the games.
Right.
I feel like if we got a really great quarterback to lead us, that would be helpful in the way that Miami has Derek King, and obviously Derek King is really making a name for himself. If FIU had a player who can mimic that, I feel like that would be very helpful. As far as lightning in a bottle, I think we have that in Devontae Price. And like I mentioned earlier, coaching this year is going to be very topical for FIU, because if we don't succeed, then there's going to be even more coaches fired after this offseason, even more than we already have this past offseason. We have a new offensive coordinator, we have a new special teams coordinator, and we have a few new coaches here and there. But the position that hasn't changed for a few years now is the head coach. And I feel like, and I really do love Butch Davis. I've met him, I've talked to him. He's a really knowledgeable person in the world of football. But if, like I said earlier, if he can't provide success for this program that's dying for success more than anything else, I just don't see a reason to keep him. And I'm going to be honest, looking at FIU's schedule, if we lose our season opener against the Long Island Sharks, I think you don't even wait. You just kick him out right after that. I don't think we will, thank goodness. But if we find a way to lose to Long Island or to against Texas State the following week, I can't see him. I can't find a reason for him to stay.
Well, the saying, heavy is the head, wears the crown. If you are the guy, and Butch has been through this before, so it won't come as a shock to him that it's a results-oriented position that he's running. And if he doesn't get the job, or if the job isn't getting done, let's put it that way. If the job isn't getting done, people will come look at him, and I'm sure he understands that. So it's time to put up or get feet on the path. So, I hate to think that that's what happened. Like you said, he seems to be a decent guy, but it's time for the next guy to put things together. And I agree with you. There's something that's missing that you have to be able to, even if you're not getting the 5 stars out of South Florida, you got to get the 4.5 stars that are going to someplace else. You have to be able to turn that around. So it's like, okay, if you all believe that University of Miami is the place to be, we can't change that until we beat them head to head consistently. However, if you think leaving South Florida is a better option than coming here, we've got to fix that. And I think that comes with your recruiting. I think that comes with how you fare in conference. And there are a lot of dominoes that have to fall. I think the first thing is they have to make it more attractive to stay home. And home doesn't always mean that you have to go to the Hurricanes.
Mm-hmm. And I recall going to that game against Miami a couple years ago. It was in Marlins Park. It was actually supposed to be a home game, but we moved it to Marlins Park because I believe out of fear of the fact that it would be 90% Canes fans in the Ricardo Silva Stadium being there. But I went there, and when we pulled off the upset and when we got back to campus, it felt like we had just won the Conference USA Championship or something.
Right.
There were fans were with their pots and pans just banging it, which I guess we like to do in South Florida for some reason. And we were just waiting for the team to come back, and we were celebrating them. I don't think I've ever seen the campus more excited about sports than right after we had just beaten the University of Miami, our big brothers, in a game of football only a few hours earlier. So the love for FIU football is there, but it's only there if they have something to cheer for.
Right.
But if we lose to an FCS team, what's there to cheer for?
Would it help? And I'm just spitballing here. Would it help for someone in administration or somewhere to say, that's our goal right there. That is our signpost. We want to get them on the schedule every year. If you can get the Hurricanes on the schedule every year, that helps. That should help both schools, but it helps them record-wise if they win, obviously. If they lose, well, that doesn't help them much, but it helps you because of 2 things. You can play in a Miami game even if you're not in Miami. That's one of the things Ohio State does. If you're in the state of Ohio, you will play in Ohio Stadium at some point, even if you aren't going to Ohio State. You can play, they'll play OU, Ohio University, they'll play Kent, they'll play Bowling Green. You will still have an opportunity to play in Ohio State if you stay in state. And I don't know if that's the plan, but that's something that the recruiters of the other schools can say, you want to play in the Horseshoe? We play them 3 years from now, that kind of thing. So would it be helpful to say, we need to play Miami every year?
I'm going to say yes. And because, again, if UM is going to be playing FIU, it's probably going to be nationally televised, which most of FIU's games are not, sadly. And imagine if we upset the Miami Hurricanes, but it's actually at home at the Ricardo Silva Stadium. It's going to be an absolute insane after party for that game. It's going to be bigger than homecoming. It's going to be bigger than any concert FIU has ever hosted on campus or whatnot before. Beating Miami, and even other schools across Florida, like the Gators or the Seminoles. Not the Gators, but the Seminoles, maybe. It's going to be insane, and it's going to be something that we're gonna remember. I still fondly remember that day when we beat the University of Miami, and honestly, I think it's probably the best day at my time here at FIU. It was incredible for a college that routinely looks like a ghost town on Saturdays and Sundays to basically throw an after party after FIU beat Miami at Marlins Park. Now it's Lone Depot Park. I do feel like if we were to create a rivalry between the University of Miami every year, things can only go up for the program, because we already have a rivalry with a Florida school in Florida Atlantic, but it hasn't really gotten us anywhere. since, like I said, we haven't beaten them in over 5 years.
Right.
So
I would think, and this is me playing administrator, which I have done before, not to any acclaim, but the idea being, I would say we have our conference schedule, and that's the schedule we're going to play. And then everybody else we're playing in the state of Florida, if possible. Whether that be Central Florida, whether that be Florida State, whether that be anybody else. We'll go to Tallahassee and play. That's fine. But I would say we have to make our bones in the state of Florida, good or bad, right or wrong, win or lose. There are enough schools here that we can set up our schedule and we play in the state of Florida as our off-season games every year. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, and I understand what you have to do when you play in Long Island, you have to do this. I understand how schedules work. But at some point, whatever the administration says, this is it. We are now playing Florida schools. Because Conference USA, we're playing all over the place. But any other game that we're playing that's not a conference game is going to be against a Florida school. And every year or 3 or whatever, we are playing Miami somehow, some way. Now, can you get that done? That's another story entirely.
But it's something we should try to work on, because looking at our schedule, no one's excited that we're playing Texas State. No one's excited that we're playing Texas Tech, which is a Big 12 school. Right. And no one's excited that we're playing Central Michigan. And even looking at some of the home games that we're going to be playing in the next few years, no one's really excited that we're playing UConn or New Mexico State. Right. But if we were to play a team like University of Florida, we'd have to go to Gainesville. Oh, right. Some fans that'd be a pretty cool road trip to go to, up to the swamp and see that, or Florida State. So I agree with that.
Yeah, a home and home with UConn. Okay, you just mentioned 3 independents or 2 independents, New Mexico and UConn. So, and that's good for them. That's great. They get to play somebody, and you don't want to not have games to play. But it's not good for you, because how many people are traveling to UConn to see your game? And as you're saying, you're lucky to get people on Saturday to your school. How the heck do you think they're going to travel to UConn to play, to watch? So, yeah, and I understand the plight of the independents, and that's something they've got to work out. But it still looks like something where you'd say, we're not leaving the state, we're not even leaving this area. We don't even leave the zip code if we can, Yeah. So that would be something. Okay, now I asked this question to everybody just because it's kind of goofy. But with the new round of conference realignment, how do you think that's going to affect Conference USA in general and FIU in particular?
Well, I can't really see colleges such as FIU be willing to go to bigger conferences, because FIU has been a sort of traveling team in the world of college football, and we've sort of built a steady home here. Obviously, we have our Shula Bowl rivalry with FAU every year, and there are some teams that we just play so often against, such as Marshall and Rice and Middle Tennessee, that not playing them anymore would be a little weird. But just looking at other Conference USA teams, a school like Rice has no business moving to a higher degree conference such as, I don't know, the Big Ten or the ACC or whatnot. But I think if FIU were to move to something like the ACC, yeah, they'd be getting beat up for sure. But eventually, because we're getting more recognition, because now we're in a big name conference such as the ACC, in the long run, that could help bring in new talent and bring in new interest for FIU, because now a high school student's going to be, you're going to be playing against 12 teams, and like only 2 of them even made bowl games last year, and only 1 of them was ranked for like a week. But now you're going to the ACC, and it's like, hey, you're going to be playing against national championship competition, and you're going to be getting that experience against players who you can probably play against on Sundays. So I ultimately, I'd be more than okay with FIU moving to something like the ACC, but I really don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen for any Conference USA team at the moment. I can't really see any Conference USA team really considering that.
What I'm looking at with the ability, with the fluidity of what's going on, something like maybe the Louisiana Tech might say, hey, can you fit us into the Sun Belt now where we've got Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana, Monroe? You know, it doesn't seem to be, it would be easier for us to be in the Sun Belt than to be over here. And a Marshall might want to go someplace like that kind of thing. That maybe not moving up or down, but side to side. That might be the thing. Or like we were talking about, Yukon and New Mexico, these places may end up being enfolded into a conference. That kind of thing, I suppose, because it's hard to last as an independent. Maybe they get brought into the mix. So I don't know. There are a lot of ways of looking at it. I don't know. It's something that popped in my head, and I always ask everybody that now because it is going to affect the landscape. It may not affect where you go, but it may affect what the conference does. Or again, the configuration of the conference as opposed to, is it going to be all here? Is it going to be, now we're going to add Conference USA teams on the West Coast? The way it initially was set up, it was Conference USA.
Yeah.
There may be an Idaho or somebody that moves up to FBS, and just throw names out there. But somebody that moves, or Nevada, Reno, or somebody that says, hey, we don't want to be in the Mountain West anymore. We want to be here, UNLV or something like that. So there are all kinds of things, and it's interesting to speculate because we don't have anything to do with it, which makes it more fun. But it's interesting to see where things might go because of two schools that decide they want to go someplace else. So, all right, anything else you'd like to add for the upcoming season for FIU?
Yeah, so I really don't like making predictions for how I think the season will play out because obviously there's going to be a ton of benefactors, especially in the world we live in now where COVID is just as rampant as it's ever been, that making a prediction way before the season begins will usually not turn out the way you think it will. But I genuinely believe that FIU can put together a decent season, maybe win 6 or 7 or even 8 games and make it to a decent bowl game. I think that's their ceiling. The lowest FIU can go is losing to Long Island.
Yeah.
If they lose to Long Island, I feel like the season is already
you're
already
done
over.
at that point. Yeah, right.
Like what are we playing for, knowing that we can't even beat the Long Island Sharks and that we can't beat like the Texas State Bobcats? Obviously, there are some matchups that no matter what will happen, I don't think FIU will really stand well with, such as Texas Tech or Central Michigan. But I do feel like that a big point in the season that I think people should watch out for is the Shula Bowl, because I feel like if AU has declined in talent and FIU is rising just a little bit, but they're getting there. So if this can finally be the year where we figure out how to beat the Owls, and we do, then you have about 7 games left after the Shula Bowl with morale being through the roof for FIU, especially going up against teams like Marshall, who are at the top of Conference USA. So I'm looking forward to this season. I do predict that we'll get 6 wins. But I really do feel like it's going to come down to how we play against Florida Atlantic, how well we do against Marshall, but even earlier than that, how well we do in our season opener against Long Island to really set the pace for the rest of the season.
And that's it. Get out of the gate fast and at least say we have a reason for continuing the season. Like you said, if you lose that first game, it also depends on how you lose it as well, if you're going to lose it. But if you lose that first game and it's just, oh my goodness, can you rally the troops, or will people start to turn, if they haven't already, start to turn on Butch Davis? So, well, Richard, I appreciate you being on. I appreciate the insight. What we'll do is we're kind of doing these all across the country. So we may edit a snippet here, a snippet there, but we will put this in its entirety out some kind of way. So make sure that people come out and take a look. And if you would, explain to our fan base how they can find you.
Yeah, so myself and my writers for Panther Now will be covering the entirety of the football season as well as all the other sports on FIU, both this upcoming fall and spring semesters. So you can just catch our work at panthernow.com. Follow us on social media, and my email and all my stuff will be on the website as well. So yeah, go Panthers.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.